Okay, I hope this voice which says this meeting is being recorded is not recorded. It's very annoying. Anyway, Gary Rietveld, 1888, 1964. Rietveld was born in Utrecht on the 21st of June. Happy birthday, Mr. Rietveld, 1888, as the son of a joiner. Ce frumos. Very nice, a joiner. I don't know exactly what that means, but it probably refers to cabinet making or furniture making, but we should all be joiners, I think. It's a very nice word. He left school at 11. He left school at 11. He should have been in prison. Unbelievable. So we are celebrating today, man out of order with the world and with life. So let me read again. I don't believe what I'm reading. He left school at 11. How could this be? To be apprenticed to his father and enrolled at night school. He did, you see, before working as a draftsman for this man and a jeweler in Utrecht from 1906 to 1911. Okay, so he worked for this man until he was 23, a jeweler. Interesting. But even more interesting is he left school at 11. 11. By the time he opened his own furniture workshop in 1917, so he was 29 then, Rietveld had taught himself drawing, painting, and model making. He afterwards set up in business as a cabinet maker. I think these people live much more adventurously than we do. In our case, everything is so predictable, you know. You finish high school, you enter the university, you finish the university, you get married, you make children, and that's it. That's it. Rietveld designed his red and blue chair in 1917, which has become an iconic piece of modern furniture. Hoping that much of his furniture would eventually be mass-produced rather than handcrafted, Rietveld aimed for simplicity in construction. In 1918, so when he was 30, he started his own furniture factory and changed the chair's colors after becoming influenced by the steel movement, of which he became a member in 1919, the same year in which he became an architect. How did he become an architect? The contacts that he made at the steel gave him the opportunity to exhibit abroad as well. In 1923, Walter Gropius invited Rietveld to exhibit at the Bauhaus. Walter Gropius, another rebellious one, at that time at least. He built the Rietveld Schroeder house in 1924, so he was 36, in close collaboration with the owner Truus Schroeder, built in Utrecht on the Prince Hendriklaan 50. The house has a conventional ground floor, but is radical on the top floor, lacking fixed walls, but instead relying on sliding walls to create and change living spaces. The house has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2000. His involvement in the Schroeder house exerted a strong influence on Truus' daughter, Han Schroeder, who became one of the first female architects in the Netherlands. Very interesting. So a furniture maker, a cabinet maker, builds a house, and the daughter of the owner of the house is inspired by the house and becomes one of the first female architects in the Netherlands. You see the power of creativity? And the house didn't ask Rietveld if he had an architect's diploma. The house just came into being because it was built, I guess, with love, with you know, that intensity that makes the creative man alive. Anyway, here is the man as a young man. I guess he was at the time when, you know, he was already designing the red and blue chair and getting involved with the steel and, you know, thinking already perhaps to build a Schroeder house. Very nice. I truly think these Dutch people are very, very inspiring. Really, I'm envious of them. You know, what's about them? You know, they have unbelievable artists and architects. They continue to do, and they had so for quite a long time. Should I mention Van Gogh, for example, or Rembrandt, for example? Ay, ay, ay. What is it about them? Maybe it helps to live under the level of the sea. It certainly does. Hello, Mr. Rietveld. Happy birthday to you. You did it. This proud look, he looks like a Bauhaus man here. He obviously enjoyed what he did. Some drawings by Mr. Rietveld, studies for the Schroeder house, or were they done after the house was built, just like Le Corbusier used to make so-called study sketches done after the buildings were built. I love this page though, you know, for a furniture piece, but you know, it shows the quest through numbers, through, it's a tormented little drawing. Very nice. Look at this arrow here. Who, who taught this man architecture, really? How did he learn architecture? From whom? Okay, so we arrive, we begin with the beginning. And the beginning is also the end in a way, because this is the most famous building he built. But he built other buildings, and unfortunately, I couldn't find many of them, but I did find a few others quite important. So you will see times in the presentation just the names of the houses. I found them on the Dutch website, but I couldn't find images for many of them. But I still found for some buildings which you probably do not know, and I didn't know before I began to study Rietveld, that they were done by him. So this is the house that we already learned that in 2000s became a protected site by UNESCO. And I love this. You see, it does pay to take risks. It does pay to be adventurous. He was adventurous on the second floor of this house. And it is because of that floor that UNESCO made it a, you know, a protected or World Heritage Site. You know the house. It's known since people decide to apply to the School of Architecture here because it's part of the so-called general culture that an applicant should have. Why did Rietveld think of having movable walls? You know, why wasn't he happy with, you know, static walls? You know, for God's sake. Well, because again, life has both being and becoming. It's also static or stable and dynamic. So you need change. Without, in the absence of change, you can get crazy. You have to have both stability and instability. And, you know, he tried to honor both here. I don't think he designed this object here, which makes tea or whatever, but it looks good though, even, you know, a touch of the past. Here is his famous red and blue chair. We'll see more of it. this is remarkable about the Dutch. They do have a sense of tradition. There is a consciousness related to tradition in the Netherlands, but they also continuously reinventing themselves, and they are not happy with just looking backwards. They continuously experiment. They continuously bring to life all kinds of things, and I think we can learn from the Dutch. I mean, he could have been happy to build a building so-called in harmony with these buildings, right? Why did he make it in this way, for God's sake? What was in his mind? Well, I know what was in his mind, and not so much in his mind, in his heart. Living, L-I-V-I-N-G, that's what he wanted to achieve, to live by himself. I mean, through his own mind and his own heart, to be alive, to feel that he doesn't repeat someone else's life. I guess it pays to leave school at 11. What else can I say? I mean, really, how would the world be if everybody left school at 11? I think it would be a very interesting world. I see now we are 11 people here. You know, yesterday we were 40, but that was before the so-called Cursul de Cercetare ended. It's incredible. You know, nothing is as predictable as the relationship of students with with what is called cercetare. Anyway, so we see three realities here: the old, the new, and the tree. I like the most the tree, but we cannot live just in a world of trees. We also need, yes, as human beings, troubled as we are, we also need abodes, we need houses, we need a roof above our heads and so on. But the tree, even without leaves, is magnificent. Why didn't God need a T-square and a rectangle? I'm asking myself. Really, I mean, God, the architect, didn't use a T-square and a rectangle. Why? He could have, no? I mean, he was God, omnipotent. He could have invented just like this, a T-square and a rectangle. No problem. But he didn't need them, it seems. Strange being, God. But Rietveld did use them, but he used them, rebelliously, because whatever the T-square and the rectangle drew, he contradicted in a way through color. Color was, the great rebellious one there, because through color he deconstructed in a way the certitudes, the grayish certitudes of the pencil on a paper with the help of T-square and the rectangle. The Rietveld Schroeder house was commissioned by this lady. It was a manifesto of the ideals of the Still group of artists and architects in the Netherlands in the 20s. How many of our houses are manifestos? The Schroeder House is a UNESCO, we know this. It differs from other significant buildings of the early movement, such as Villa Savoie by Le Corbusier or Villa Tugendhat by Mies van der Rohe. Three non-architects, Mies van der Rohe, Le Corbusier, and Gerrit Rietveld. They are teaching us about architecture, aren't they? I guess these images were created by some student also working for Cursul de Cercetare. Compositions generally emphasize the separation of planes, the application of primary colors, and the spatial relationship of solids and voids. Yes, of course. Window sizes vary on an individual building from large to small. Strange. They may be arranged in patterns or one unit. It's very didactic here. I regret now I placed that in the presentation. Anyway, I actually launched a competition to build another house right across the little road from this building. There is a little space. Not to copy this building, but to be inspired by its non-conformism and create another so-called Schroeder house. I even forgot if I received some works or not, but the competition was launched. Now this is a building I don't think I have pictures for now. This one either. I'm sorry, it's in Dutch. I told you I included this just the names in the presentation, but I couldn't find pictures, at least for the moment, and I apologize for this. But we'll arrive at buildings where we do have pictures. Unfortunately, there is quite a number of them. He built a lot. Maybe some of them were destroyed by war. I don't know. I couldn't find pictures. There are too many. Anyway, now we arrived at this Bioscope in Utrecht. It's a store, it's a cafe or whatever it is. But it was built in 1936 and it still looks fresh. I mean, aesthetically speaking. So it looks a little bit different now. The Esprit building, very different from what he made at first. Maybe in a way, this is a metaphor for our time. So this is what he made in 1936, and this is what it became now. I think it's more mellow and more banal now than it was in 1936. Sad. Another building in Amsterdam, no pictures, no pictures. Now this is a little experimental house for like a vacation house. I don't know what to say about this one. I guess it's okay, but a little simplistic, even for a vacation little house. The chairs, they are more interesting than the building. The most interesting thing about this building is that color yellow. Otherwise, it is a little strange. Even this canopy here is. Anyway, now this is the Dutch pavilion at the Venice Biennial, and it still exists. And that's where the Netherlands have their contribution at the Venice Biennial. So this was done by Rietveld, and I hope that Bogdan will remember this when he will be in the campus of the Venice Biennial this year. It's a good building, and it's simple as it should be, perhaps. But look, there are interesting things going on here. How do you explain that the Netherlands commissioned a cabinet maker to design the pavilion of the country at the prestigious Venice Biennial, and not one of the many architects, so-called architects with a diploma? Well, because Rietveld, created something significant, and he was appreciated for what he created. Now, this is part of the installation. That ceiling was not done by him in that way. This is the building. Gerrit Rietveld in Venice, the eternally inspiring Venice. You see, it's very simple, the facade, but he created an event with the entrance with very simple means again. But this is what architecture is about. It surprises you when you easily could have fallen into some kind of somnolence because of the predictability of everything else. And all of a sudden, a surprise, or as Le Corbusier would say, something touches your heart. This is what the architect is supposed to do with very simple means. Otherwise the building, as you can see in plan, is a square. But again, the diagonals these diagonals were created by the curators of the Dutch pavilion. But I see here Hermann Herzberger, maybe he contributed with this arrangement. Anyway, the impulse towards the diagonal maybe started here with the entrance into the building by Rietveld. And do you see this toilet here with the entrance from the outside directly on both sides? This was done and is done in many villages in Romania. And I don't know why it is not done any longer, because I think it's very beneficial from many points of view. It's fine. Now I understand that this is a special context. Is the exhibitional ground of the Venice Biennial is not a private house. This is destined also for the general public, but it's also destined for the people working here. It's okay. I don't know what this is, and I don't know Dutch. Another pavilion, 1954, 1965, Rietveld Pavilion. I know what it is. And it became a museum, and a very important museum, and it was reconstructed. I forgot, it was destroyed, and it was reconstructed, but it's a very fine building. I think this building is as important, or almost as important, as the Schroeder house. Unfortunately, not all pictures are good resolution, but some will be like this one. So you see, this is true, was built after the Barcelona pavilion by Mies, but it is different from the building by Mies. And for example, it's minimalism. It's not really minimalism. It's more. Mies can be misleading because Mies appears to be a minimalist, but he used some very expensive stone there in the Barcelona pavilion. Here, this building is more modest, and I think its modesty is a quality. And you'll see how the building came into being. He also has weaving, the weaving of the constructive elements, which adds something to the building. I think something important. So this is also by Gerrit Rietveld. How beautiful it is, a wall which has a natural porosity, so to speak, because it's built of this units that have the porosity built in, so to speak, and then they're just placed one above the other in a, you know, playful way. And of course, here maybe there were the problems of insulation were not addressed like in a conventional house, but still the idea to weave, I mean, this would connect with the textile houses of Frank Lloyd Wright. There are suggestions here for how to build that I think are valuable. Okay, this is a bus station with a typical Dutch bicycles nearby. It's not impressive, but it's not supposed to be impressive, and it was not intended to be impressive. It's a bus stop, that's all. Efficient, it works. Is it architecture? Almost. That man seems to enjoy himself there. And this is a clock he designed. Not bad, cubistic, playful, joyous, and probably it works. A weaving mill. Yes, he designed even a mill. It's nice. I mean, but there is creativity even here. This is a house, a private house, horizontal, but the trees are vertical, of course. And there is already the dialectic between the tree and the house. Interesting, this round thing here, I don't know what it is. Part of the courtyard, I guess. Yeah, sorry about these many titles that don't have images. No, apartment buildings. We build many things, not just the Schroeder house. If I make a point about this, maybe the presentation is has a certain worth just because of that, maybe. It is said that the Dutch are very pragmatic, and they are, but strangely and paradoxically, exactly when they achieve an obvious level of pragmatism, they also become poets. I mean, look at this stair here. I almost said it's delicious. And, it works, but without the inhibitions caused by, or the fears caused by, an unending concern with security and so on. It's an event. And there are even discrete gestures towards some kind of a discrete ornamentation here, unrequired by the strict laws of functionalism. They are inexpensive apartment buildings. That's what they are. Quite a number of them. Social housing. Gary Rietveld, 1950s. But if you look at the facade of the building, you realize that it's not as banal as it might appear at first. And as opposed to the commandment of a certain section of modernity, he avoided the horizontal window. And these windows do open, as opposed to many windows in many buildings today, which you cannot open. They're just, we use glass to separate, and then, of course, Its Majesty, the air conditioning, steps in to take care of what has to be taken care of in the absence of being able to open windows. When I look at these buildings, I almost see his face. Another pavilion in Brussels at the international exhibition. This was 1958. Yes, I think that's where on this occasion, Le Corbusier and Yanis Xenakis built a very impressive pavilion, the Philips Pavilion. Again for the Dutch, because it was for the Philips company. I couldn't find better pictures. What is this? I don't know, I forgot the function of this building, 1958. Again, the tree again is asserting itself in beautiful ways, with leaves or without leaves. Here we have a dialogue between two verticals, the vertical of nature or God and the vertical of man, the flag, the pole, the flag pole. Two worlds, face to face in a way. And in between them, the entrance into the building by Rietveld. Another villa. A school. It even has its name. It looks like he had a middle name, maybe Theodore, TH. I don't know what this is, another pavilion of some sort. I think the bicycle was probably invented and designed by God. It's one of these things which are, the bicycle is eternal, and I love bicycles. I think we need more bicycles in the world. It will be a better world. The more bicycles, the better. They don't pollute the air. They provide a significant help in moving, and it's good for the health as well. I wish all the prime ministers of the world and even leaders of countries would just bike, like in Sweden, for example. It would be a great thing. Hello, Mr. Rietveld. Here is, the young cabinet maker. Some kind of paying homage to him. But he does look like a determined young man. A man who knew what he was doing, so to speak. I mean, when I look at his face, I see a clear invitation to be yourself, or myself, or ourselves, to be determined and to follow your heart and to move courageously on your path, to create your path, to create yourself. This man created himself. He was not the only one, of course, but we are talking about him now. Okay, another villa, and we're approaching the end of the presentation. I think after this I show his furniture design. But all in all, I think I managed somehow to show that he did many other things besides the Schroeder house. Even this building has something interesting, although, he was very close to being, predictable. But I look at this parapet and it's the summum of simplicity. But somehow I didn't see too many parapets like this in the world, although it is very rational and logical. I'm not always against what is rational and against what is logical. That still, when looking at this, at least in part, I still see his face. No, not yet the furniture design. Okay, now, furniture designer. He was a very creative furniture designer, as you know. He designed all kinds of things, even, whimsical chairs like this. But his most famous piece is the red and blue chair, this one. And there are variations on it. He was playful and he was a sculptor as well. Interesting how the diagonal is insinuating itself here, because you see it, probably you consider this the back, but somehow, it only has one arm, and you could also sit somehow diagonally. So that the rebelliousness of the diagonal is present implicitly in this chair. The red and blue chair, very famous. maybe more famous than comfortable, but that's okay. The chairs that look good usually are not very comfortable, but you know, I guess you can have everything in life. So you have to choose between the pleasure of the eye or the pleasure of something else. Sorry about this. I knew it was a piece which was, you know, no, this is actually vertical. I thought that this so-called wall was actually you know, the horizontal surface, but no, this is the wall. So this is the side elevation of a piece of furniture which you are going to see later. The zigzagging chair, also famous by Rietveld, the Z chair. This is also similar a little bit, but more playful, more ludic, with a piece done by Alvarado. Well, there are variations here. The famous red and blue chair became a sofa, equally uncomfortable. This very moving Ur chair by him. In I like this one the most actually because of the patina and the fact it's not finished and even the fact that it's not colored. So he designed this chair for the Schroeder house. Now this was not, I don't think this was designed by him. I included here because it was maybe inspired by some of his designs. You need some space for this chair, if we have to call it a chair. More elaborate piece, more elaborated piece. I feel tempted to call this chair the Zen chair because there is no obvious diagonal here, but the diagonal is implicit, just like water was implicit in some landscape design by Zen gardeners, where the water was not present, but it was designed in such a way that the imagination of the visitor, of the Zen visitor, would provide the water. Here you provide the diagonal through your imagination. It doesn't exist, but It is implied in the Constitution, in the way the chair was configured, designed, and built. Is this for children? Is this for adults? Is this for the child within the adult? Whatever. It's a whimsical and ludic piece. I find Rietveld a more innocent architect and designer and furniture designer than Peter Zumthor, who is also a furniture maker or was a furniture maker. But I don't think Zumthor is as innocent as Rietveld was. And I use the word innocent in a good sense of the word, not in the sense of, lamentable naivete. Now the so-called the steel painting is actually a painting by Piet Mondrian. Well, he was involved in the steel movement, but it should have been identified as a Mondrian painting. Okay, so happy birthday, Gary Rietveld. And now I go to a long, actually, presentation about Benedetta Tagliabue. There are many things here to be said, and I hope I will not bore you. So it is his birthday, her birthday, sorry, and I talked a little bit about her yesterday because she was married to Enric Miralles, and even now the firm that she leads is called Miralles Tagliabue, although he died. And this is the website. If you are interested in the works of this firm, and I suggest you are, because there are interesting works there. Truly, we have a great chance today to be able to have access to so much information from the comfort, so to speak, of our homes. Here she is. She is actually Italian. She is not Catalan or Spanish. She's Italian. And she was employed by the office of Enric Miralles and Carme Pinos. And then, I don't know, it seems Enric Miralles fell in love with her. She fell in love with him. And they got married. And they have a son, I think. And the son also is involved in the practice of this firm. But she's Italian, and she studied in Milan, I think at the School of Architecture there. And she was part of, for 3 years, part of the jury for the Pritzker Prize. And one day maybe she will get it herself. Many books behind her, just as there were many books yesterday behind Carme Pinos. And I read that also Enric Miralles was very fond of books. Here she is with her car. That car that I mentioned is worth having, all of us having. That is a bicycle. Now, I don't know very well what she wants to say, particularly with a piece on her left hand, but anyway. Her office is where her apartment is in Barcelona. And maybe it would have been a good moment now to invite some of the students from Bucharest who visited their office, her office, 2 years ago to talk to us about it. Anyway, this work in particular, I think, is one of her most important works and the most radical, the Spanish Pavilion, because here she truly tried to weave, and I'm a great fan of weaving in architecture. I mean, this is literally woven, at least at, at the level of the skin of the building. And here I have a digression in a way, but it refers to weaving in architecture, that usually when we think of the word architect, we only refer to the first part, A-R-C-H, and we forget the second part, T-E-C-T, which comes from texture and actually text, which means to weave. But usually we forget the second part of the word architect or architecture. And that's exactly where the essence of the word is. So texture comes from network structure, Middle French texture, Latin textura, stem from texere, to weave, from the Proto-Indo-European root tex, T-E-K-S, which means to weave, to fabricate, to make wicker or wattle framework. And that's exactly what she did for the Spanish Pavilion. Godfrey Zemper is significant in this because he, in the 19th century, underlined the importance of weaving for architecture as being actually the first architectural gesture. In the 4 elements of architecture, he states that there is the hearth where the fire is, the roof, which is connected with carpentry, the enclosure, which is with textile work, because it weaves vegetal materials that the first man, so to speak, found around himself. So he created the first so-called wall, a flexible wall made of vegetal materials. And that's where weaving was. And then the mound, which was based on stonework, is the platform on which the first house was built. So hearth, metallurgy, ceramics, is the hearth is where the fire is. Roof, carpentry, enclosure, textile, weaving, and the mound, earthwork. And here they are. The hearth is here. The enclosure is woven. Then you have the roof, which is carpentry, and the mound, which is here at the base of the house, is stone masonry. And he found these 4 elements in the Caribbean hut and in the Great Exhibition in 1851. And he was inspired to write about the 4 elements of architecture. This is the scheme proposed by Abel Ogier. I call it the masculinist perception or theory about the first hut, the first building. Abel Ogier, the Frenchman, said that the first building came to be based on columns and beams, trunks of trees, but I think Godfrey Zemper was right, because the first man didn't have the tools to cut down trees and make columns. He didn't have those tools. So Godfrey Zemper saw that the first vertical elements were actually woven through vegetal materials that the people at that time didn't need tools for. They just remove parts of whatever they found around themselves, and they created this textile wall, if we are to call it a wall. Interesting theory, Zemper's theory. I call it the feminist theory of architecture. This is the masculinist theory of architecture of Abel Ogier. Now, weaving goddesses, I have to talk about them because there are 5 or 6, all goddesses, all women, no men, Ishtar in old Mesopotamia, a goddess of weaving. Then Lilith, depicted here as the demon, the devil, who gives the apple to the domesticated woman made from the bone of Adam, Eva, Adam, and probably Lilith. Neith in Egypt, also goddess of weaving. Arachne for Europeans, who the jealous Athena transformed into a spider, still weaving the net out of jealousy because she won the competition in a weaving competition. Arachne was a mortal as opposed to Athena, who was a goddess, and who sprang already armed from the head of Zeus without a mother, just as Jesus didn't have an apparent father. Anyway, Frigg, the Scandinavian goddess of weaving, and she is weaving here. So all women, goddesses of weaving. That's why weaving is connected with womanhood, and that's why at the Bauhaus, women at the beginning were only allowed to study weaving. They were thought of being, inadequate for architecture, which is obviously not the case. Durga, for the Hindus, also a goddess of weaving with many arms. Durga. Even the former queen of Romania, Regina Elisabeta, she was also fond of, I don't know if she, she did weaving herself, but there is this picture with her. I forgot how it is called, this Fuyorul, or anyway. So back to Benedetta Tagliabue and her woven pavilion for Spanish, for Spain. She won the competition and she built it. Now it's true, behind this fragile enclosure, there is a steel structure. It's true. That could make us maybe think twice or have some comments about it. But in essence, she was trying to create a woven pavilion. This, in a way, is about the art of basketry. A very courageous proposal, and she won. Again, it is proven that when you take risks, you might win. These things were manufactured, of course, in China. And this is what it is behind the fragile skin. There is manual work here, but there is also digital work. It has both. It has a problem though. The roof is flat, actually, just like the Red Dragon of Daniel Lipskind in Milan. But you don't see it from the eye level. And it's almost flat. In the representations, it's a little bit less than in reality. As I told you yesterday, there is an architect who studied in Bucharest, and she finished the school in Bucharest, Elena Nedelcu, who is a partner in the firm of Miraes Tagliabue. Now, I wanted to show a few things relating to weaving by a young architect who is now in New York, but she's Egyptian, although she was born in the United States. Some weaving studies. She did this work for a tattoo academy in, I think, in Australia, either Melbourne or New Zealand. I'm a little bit confused, but it doesn't matter so much. It was made for a competition for a tattoo academy, and these are studies of architectural basketry, as I call it, similar to what Benedetta Tagliabue did in a way, but more wild somehow. But I like these studies, you know, done in a very intricate way using Maya. Extremely meticulous work. I mean, it is unbelievable. Maybe it helped that everybody in her family is a dentist, except her, who is an architect. Now, this is the office of Benedetta Tagliabue in Barcelona. Here she is. Nice luminous office, maybe too luminous for working on the computer. There are at least two Romanians here. There are two architects, two women architects who studied in Bucharest and they work here. One is Elena Nedelcu. The other one, I forgot her name, Ana Otsoiu or something like, no, not Otsoiu. Anyway, there are at least two. It's very, because it's also an apartment, so there is this conjunction or overlapping or intersection between the office and the home and the office. Now, this is not the home. These are some other works by her, but we'll arrive at, for example, now there is this fragment of an interview with her. You know, she was asked, in looking at your design values, who or what has been the biggest influence on your work as an architect? Benedetta Tagliabue. Well, of course, I always say that the biggest influence is my husband, Eric Miraes. He was a person looking everywhere. I think I have the same attitude of being very curious about the works of others, but also curious about what artists do or what other types of professions do and what can be discovered through films. I think this may be the type of influence we can imagine in our work more broadly. And I would say the same thing to the students. Be curious, and not just because there is a little course called Cercetare, and then your curiosity ends. No, and no again. Benedetta Tagliabue is right. Be curious, be like a sponge, absorb. Only in this way you can grow. Here they are, the young, on the left, Enric Miralles, on the right, Benedetta Tagliabue. Now they did this, they won the competition and they built it, and she actually had a major role in this because her husband died, and she continued to work for finalizing the building. And this was a governmental building, the most important building in Edinburgh, the Scottish Parliament. And it was done. And we can only take our hats off in front of her efforts and in front of her. And it's a very, probably the most unconventional governmental building in the world, is this one. It didn't want to impose authority on the people, but quite the opposite, through its unusual forms, to show fragmentation, openness, non-conventionality. It was a courageous proposal, and I can only be happy it was accepted, and it won the competition, and it was built. So Benedetta Tagliabue, still a young woman, she accomplished this. It wasn't just the project itself, but the implementation of the project to become what is called reality, to become a built work. And look at these bow windows, which are, you will see also pictures from the inside, very, very unusual, particularly for a governmental building. Inside there are alcoves for reading and studying, but can you imagine that this is the elevation of the Scottish Parliament? It is. Hello, sir. Be careful not to fall from there. Yeah, that's how it is inside, So I guess the minister or whatever, the Secretary of State, sits here, and here there are books or files or folders, and but very, very unusual, you see. And yes, it was built. So this is Scotland, not in Catalonia, not in Barcelona. The large gathering place, assembly hall, so to speak, is also remarkable. Very well done. It truly shows a concern for being together, luminous. There is wood. It's warm. It's a warm place. The entrance hallway itself very unconventional. This was a major and a complex piece of work. Enric Miralles and Benedetta Tagliabue. Here is the Prime Minister of Scotland with his traditional skirt, and the Queen of Great Britain, of England. Visiting the building. So there is this level of spontaneity also and fragility, which adds to the humanity of the place. Because in essence, we are all children. It doesn't matter, one is prime minister and another one is, I don't know, begging in the corner of the street. We are all children, and we are all fragile. And this is what this building seems to say. Now, of course, Charles Jenks, with his witty remarks, had to take issue with these things resembling a pistol. You know, it does, but I don't know if it's the most important thing to say. Now, this is a School of Management in China in progress. I don't know if it was finalized. They have many works now. This tower also in China in progress. It's just a rendering. I know, and Elena Nedelcu is very involved, like the project manager for a large subway station near Paris. This is a social housing block from 2013 in Madrid. Maybe not all works are equally exciting or interesting. This is a park in Barcelona, the Diagonal Mar Park. A reference to Gaudí with a ceramic work from Parc Güell, of course. Even Jean Nouvel built a park, if we can use the verb to build about a park in Barcelona. Now, yesterday I showed a market built by Carme Pinos, the first wife of Enric Miralles. Now I show the Santa Caterina market by Benedetta Tagliabue, also in Barcelona. Then in a very similar urban context. This one more colorful than the other one I showed yesterday by Carmen Pinos. This is the top, a view of the top of the building. And the plan, you can see the same author or authors of the Scottish Parliament. Rather intricate and tormented plan, but interesting, and showing the dynamics of a market in a way. And the dynamics of negotiations which take place within a market. Here it is, how it looks like. It's more interesting, the other facade on the other side, we are going to see it. So here you have the individualities of the people living their own apartments, but meeting in the market. So this is a place of gathering. It's the place of togetherness. Could we call this the cathedral of food? Probably not. But the roofing is transcending in a way what the food on the level of the eye seems to advocate. I think the roofing is telling us we don't live in order to eat, but we eat in order to live. So while food is necessary, of course, and it's nice to have good, tasty food, but we should not forget that we eat in order to live and not the other way around. If there is something here that exalts, well, maybe the smell of some of these delicious salamis or whatever, that might be the case too. But I'm hoping that the true exaltation, in the sense I am referring to, comes from the geometry of the roof. And not just the roof, there are interesting things here going on. You know the market in Rotterdam by MVRDV where they have the pictorial, colorful part of what they did inside the market, still on the roof, but on the interior side. Here is on the exterior side. I mean, when I look at this picture, I interpret it in this way. Maybe I'm subjective. I know I'm moving towards a market. I know that this building is a market. But in relation with what I try to say, looking at the architecture, looking at this roof, looking at its base, there is here selling and buying, there is buying food. But I still think somehow this building is saying you eat in order to live and not the other way around. Unfortunately, I think for many people, life means to eat. I receive daily messages from all kinds of, businesses, intensely concerned with eating, eating, and eating again, forgetting that the goal is not to eat. There's just a means. The goal is to live, L-I-V-E. And this is what this roof seems to say. Okay, eat well. But this is just, in a way, the foundation of the building or the ground floor of the building. The building of your life is more ample, is more complex, and more lyrical in a way. Whatever, even Émile Cioran said that he learned how to eat in France. I find it pathetic, actually, with all due respect for Émile Cioran. I mean, if you read his philosophy, and then you read that he was so fond of discovering what eating means in France, I think this narcissism of relating to eating is, in my opinion, very problematic. Eating is a means, it's not a goal. When you transform it into some kind of a religion, I think is problematic, in my opinion. And this is what I see here. This roof is transcending the obsession with eating. Or one could say, come on, it's not so. You eat well, and that's why you begin to fly, so to speak. I don't know. Anyway, Gas Natural Office Building. This is a strange building, considering it's a corporate building, and I know the rebelliousness of the quiet, discreet rebelliousness of Enric Miralles. They won this building when I think he was alive, but it was built, I think, I'm not sure, after he died. It might have been built when he was still alive. It's a corporate glass tower, you know, an office building, but it has a special architectural tooth, if I can call it so, is this strange thing which I don't know what function it contains, that shows the rebelliousness of Eric Miralles and Benedetta Tagliabue. And it's that interest, that part, this one, which changes everything. Otherwise, you know, it's a more or less skillfully designed office tower. But this part is provocative and unsettling. And that's what art does. Look at this. This is almost a negation of everything else in this building. Why did they do it? I don't know, but I imagine it was maybe even unconscious or irrational revolt against the corporate world, as the plan seems to be at least at the ground floor. Someone in Romania would have called this spații gâtuite. I like this expression, spații gâtuite. Is this the scream of the artist or the poet? Probably, or it's possible, yes. Self-despising himself or herself that had to do this corporate building. Is this the pathos of making money? Probably. The pathos of exploiting the resources of the world? Probably. Glass, glass, and glass again. But the scream of the artist or the poet is still present here, I would say, although still covered in glass. This is the subway station I was talking about where Elena Nedelcu works. They won the competition and it's being built now. This is part of the project that they won the competition with. It's a major transportation hub. Why they include there the face of a woman, I don't know. Playing for the project. Play is very, very important. Be ludic when you do architecture. Bring joy in, and that's what they did. In this case was also a reference to the ethnic population that lives in that area of Paris or near Paris. And so they tried to create an architecture that relates to them. You know, some glimpses of, you know, maybe what might be called ethno-architecture to an extent. They are building one also in Napoli, also a large subway station. I hope I have images here. When you have a creative activity and it is acknowledged as being a creative activity, you have the chance to, you know, to become well known as being creative and to be commissioned accordingly. I don't think it is true that so-called clients or beneficiaries only like banal buildings. I don't think it's true. I actually think the opposite is true, that many, maybe not all of them, but many, when they pay some money, when they have an expenditure, they want something interesting. It's only normal. Even when you buy something, a piece of cloth or whatever, you want to buy something interesting. You don't want to buy something banal. 2011 International Horticulture Exhibition in China. This is the world rather of Benedetta Tagliabue, then Enrique Miralles, I would say. And, you know, I think she brought in a valuable alternative in a way to designing and doing architecture. Vigo University campus. You see the importance of the ornamental work. Without it, this would have been a banal world. But because of this, it becomes a little bit a textile work. It is, to an extent at least, woven. Because there is a connection between weaving and ornamentation. This is an extension of a youth music school, and as you see, it's called already the Miralles Hall, the name of the architect, who is not alive any longer, but in homage to him, this was named the Miralles Hall. Labit Pavilion for Expo in 2015 in Milano. This kind of floral architecture has its risks when it becomes too literal, I would say. I think architecture better remains within the field of abstraction. There are dangers when it becomes too literal, I would say. But the insinuations of the natural world or the floral world into architecture is a path to be explored, I think. But in my opinion, these pavilions needed an increased abstractization, which at this level didn't yet, in my opinion, quite happen. Here you have the pavilion that I mentioned by Daniel Lipskin, the dragon with its flat roof, otherwise very convincing as you look at it from the, you know, the space around it. Built for China by Lipskin, and this is by Benedetta Tagliabue. this is the other large subway station that they are working on now in Napoli, in Italy. Another cathedral of transportation, if I can call it so. A tower, a tower in China in construction. We already saw a picture of it. And the natural world is becoming a Baroque world in the field of architecture. So there are intimations between the Baroque world, some kind of a neo-Baroque architecture, and the fluidities sometimes can be found in nature, or maybe more than sometimes. Otherwise, the typical glass tower we have so many of. Another tower in Taiwan. I don't know if the construction started for this one, but the competition entries always start from the context, both physical and metaphysical, the cultural one, as you can see here. How this translates into this, it's not very explicit to me, but it is in construction. Now, this is a very interesting museum for the Picasso of China, as this painter was called. At the time when I made this presentation, it was not finalized, but it was brought to a certain level of completion. It's like a small village in a way, archaic, village-like complex of buildings. He must be a very important painter if such a large museum was built for him. Isn't it strange that the most strict communist country in the world became the most liberated and liberating in the field of architecture now? That is China. They build anything. So when we excuse ourselves in Romania that we are still in transition, I am asking, why is it that China is not still in transition? I mean, there are 32 years since the revolution. For how long do we keep invoking the so-called transition? For how long do we keep invoking and blame what happened between 1989? There are more than 30 years already. I think we should blame ourselves, not whatever happened between 1989. The Chinese are showing clearly that one can move on, and they do move on, even if at some levels maybe there is a famous conjunction between two systems in China, but it works. China economically is a phenomenon today, and so was its ability to defeat or contain the virus, the pandemic, although it might have started from there, and who knows exactly in what conditions. But it is amazing to me that such a large country as China has, at least at the level of statistics, much, much less. I mean, the numbers of infected people is much smaller than in Romania, which has a population almost 100 times less. I mean, smaller. And so in the number of deaths. How do you explain it? And this museum also shows, that anything is possible in China. And this is what Benedetta Tagliabue built, or is building. As a British architect said, we cannot build in Great Britain what they build in China. In China, you can build anything. The so-called clients are extremely open-minded. You can build anything. This, of course, has also a negative side, because there are many aberrations coming into being, and they erase mountains overnight. It's true, but good things also come into being. It's maybe unavoidable when such a quick transition from what happened before and what happens now. It's unavoidable to even make mistakes. But I think what Benedetta Tagliabue is doing here is interesting. It's a hybrid architecture. It's maybe at times a little bit uncomfortable, but I still admire this attempt to escape the dogmatic tenets of modernism. Now, we end the presentation on Benedetta Tagliabue with a stage design she did for this great choreographer, Merce Cunningham, in the United States. And it moves me to see the unity between two creators, a great dancer and choreographer, and a very interesting and interested architect. And I encourage architects and students in architecture to contemplate such cultural conjunctions. Don't think only about architecture. As Wolf Prick said, if you only think of architecture, you will only get architecture. Here is Mr. Cunningham, truly a brilliant dancer, avant-garde dancer and choreographer, and partner in life with with an equally brilliant man, John Cage, an avant-garde musician. So this is the dancer for whom Benedetta Tagliabue did this work. It was probably on his 90th birthday. I don't know the occasion, but isn't it moving? I mean, truly, you look at this man, he's alive, he's 90. He says, obvious, some health problems, obviously some health problems, but this is a triumph of art. Art is able to transgress death. Yes, maybe in a, only in a metaphorical way, but I think there is some truth in what the Latin said, ars longa vita brevis. Although here you might say it's the opposite true, that, no, it's not. It's art wins the fight with time, with death. And these people are applauding Cunningham. Why are they applauding him? Just because he is 90 years old? Many people are 90 years old. No, that's not because of it. It's because he dedicated his life to art in fresh, new, provocative ways. And I think this is the way to go in art and in architecture. Be yourself, promote something new, promote something unseen yet. Not just for the sake of the so-called new. It's about being true to your vision, to what you are, to what you feel. And this is what this man did in dance. And he chose Benedetta Tagliabue to do a design for this commemorative performance. And this is what Benedetta Tagliabue did. And again, it is the triumph of art, of vision, of courage, of iconoclasm, of creativity. There is geometry, there is fragmentation, there is matter, there are materials, there is steel. But beyond this is the vision of an architect trying to pay homage to a great dancer, a great choreographer. It moves me, this image. I mean, look, look at the coordination of the legs, and look at the determination. But this multiplicity in unity, you know, several people, several bodies, several legs, several arms, coordinated by a vision, by music and by dance, and by architecture behind. Thank you. Happy birthday, Benedetta Tagliabue.